Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to let everybody know that I put together this short video just last minute to address some questions that were raised after last week's CASA Training Academy video. It was 10 Habits of Highly Effective Advocacy for Children. I want to say I do say often, different county, different country. And I know that the state says that as well. I know that Leslie said that before starting the presentation of the 10 Habits of Highly Effective Advocates for Children. So whenever you have a CASA training webinar, please keep that in mind. And if you do encounter any differences in any of the online trainings, and just bring it to my attention and I'll address them. With the monthly online training academies, I usually only have 1 or 2 of you attend, but this particular training, 4 of you participated. So this is really great, and I really appreciate that you are getting a head start on your annual in-service training hours. And since I really don't want any of you confused or have unanswered questions or wondering what you should or should not be doing, I want to address all of this. So with that being said, I did not participate in that training, but I did review and print out the slides, and I'm just going to touch on the ones that I felt were a little bit confusing or the ones that may have needed a bit more attention, on our end of it. So just bear with me because this is the last minute decision to create a video to address this. And as you can probably tell, I'm reading from some notes. I just felt it would be better to address it and be more engaging within a video, because sometimes when I send an email, I feel like it's kind of like blah, 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 blah to you guys. So I just want to make sure that I did the video real quick. So what we're going to do is start with the first one that I noticed, and also the first one that was brought to my attention, basically. So that was number 14, slide number 14 on that presentation that you guys did. And the ones of you that did not do it, it's still good for you to hear this anyway, So on number 14, it said when advocates are at odds with allied professionals, FCMs, therapists, counselors, etc., families' focus shifts to the disagreement while time is standing still for the children we serve. So it says we can agree to disagree and still be respectful. That keeps the focus on the child. We must maintain objectivity and realize that we have been thrust into the lives of families when they are going through a trauma and the child is at a vortex of the situation. Our actions and responses must be tempered with respect and professionalism, and anything else can have impact on our advocacy. Now, this sounds fine, but one of the volunteers sent me a text and said something about, it was basically saying in the slideshow and in the presentation, you're supposed to be listen, but basically not give your opinions. So of course, I want to encourage everyone to be strengths-based. I want you to be professional. I want you to be respectful, and I want you to work collaboratively with everybody on the team. That's the process, and that's how we want the process to work. But we need to use meetings to point out any questionable behaviors, gaps or progress, just like referrals not being put into place or missed or canceled appointments, things like that. So there's no point in us going to a team meeting. Honestly, if you're just going to sit there, and of course I want you, like I said, I want you to be respectful, I want you to be professional, wait your turn, of course, but there's no point in us going to a CFTM if we're just going to sit there and do this. Okay, because you're an advocate, you're on this team for a reason, you're a voice for this child, you have a different perspective from anybody else on the team, so it would not make sense for us to go to a team meeting and not say anything. So, especially like I always say, there's that elephant in the room, or everybody's feeding you this, the emperor has new clothes, when you know very well the emperor does not have clothes on, so you want to point that out, because there's such a thing as being objective, and there's such a thing as being realistically based. So we need to make sure that we are forming our opinions based on facts, obviously. And we're going to get into that some more too, because you need that for your reports and things of that nature. But yeah, I don't want anyone going to a team meeting and just sitting there. So if that's what you're taking away, please don't take that away. There was also another one that said something about listen first, and that's great. Listen to everything, take it all in, make notes if you have to, and then based on your notes and what your thoughts on this case and your experience on this case and how you feel this case is going and what you feel needs to be addressed, say that. When they come to you at a team meeting, just don't say, I don't have anything. That's not what we're here for. We're not here for to sit there and say, I don't have anything to add. There would be no point in a CASA ever being assigned to a child if that's what we did. So I don't want that to be anyone's takeaway from that PowerPoint. So that's one of the things that I wanted to address. Now on slide, it says, I have 21 and 23 written down, and I think those are the ones I was talking about. It was talking about court reports, 21 is. So it says that these are filed, and distributed to the parties. Judges do not see your case logs. Right, they don't. Your report should always contain fact-based information, not opinions. Now, I did have something to say about that because when addressing best interest, you also have to give your observation and your translation of that observation. So that is basically an opinion. It's based on facts, but it is a translation of the facts as to what is the best interest of your child. So you do have to give that. Your court report is not just going to be fact, 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 fact. I've never seen any report written like that. There's no, like I said, just like a team meeting, there's no reason to write a report. There's no reason to submit a report if it's all just going to be facts that everybody already knows about the case. It's great to have the facts. We want the facts. Just like in training, I say, once we get to your recommendations in this report, it should all make sense. Based on everything we read in this report, these recommendations should make sense. So yes, your report should be filled with fact-based information, but it should also have that information translated into your opinion as to what is the best interest of this child. So I hope that makes sense so you don't feel like, well, I can only base facts. I can't say what I really think. Yes, you can. You can absolutely do that. I want you to do that. Like we said, different county, different country. We take all the facts. We give our unbiased opinion to the court. What is in the best interest of the child? So use independent judgment to form an informed opinion based on facts of what is truly best interest. So if you need more help with that, let me know. But I just wanted to make that perfectly clear because I think that's really important to understand. Then now on 23, slide 23, bear with me here because like I said, this is a last minute thing and I know you can tell I'm reading a lot, but I want to make sure that I get all this in. And it says, always keep in mind that the best interest for the child is the basis of your advocacy. Be quick to listen, slow to respond, and open to understanding. So I don't want anyone to take this out of context either. It says be quick to listen, and we all want to have good listening skills. Slow to respond, and open to understanding. That's all fine and dandy, but we don't want to be so slow that we missed our opportunity to insert what we feel is in the best interest of this child, just like at a team meeting. Like I said, listen, take notes, pay attention to all the perspectives. You know, I have gone into team meetings where I have totally had one perspective, but sat there and, taken into account what everybody has said. And I'm willing to compromise. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense too. I can understand that. I see your perspective on that, but I still feel like this is important. So let's work together here. So it doesn't mean just sit back and mum's the word. Slow to respond doesn't mean like, oh, a week or two later. You have an opportunity now. So take everything that you have into account. Be very respectful, be professional, be collaborative, but make sure that you're putting that voice out there. And it says, avoid inserting your own personal standards of beliefs. Now that we do teach in training. We're not trying to conform anybody into what we believe or anything like that. I'm not trying to push my beliefs on anyone. We are totally going by the book on this, okay? So always try to remember that. You have to draw that line. That does make sense. And it says objectivity should be extended to all parties in the case and should be reflected in your reports. And we talk about that all the time. But it keeps saying facts, not opinions. And like I said, this is your independent judgment to form an informed opinion based on the facts of what is truly in the best interest of the child. So it is an opinion, it is fact-based, okay? That's how you're translating all of the facts. Just keep remembering that, because I don't want anyone holding in what they feel like is in the best interest of the child or sitting there not saying anything, whether it's a team meeting or whether it's in court. If we go into that hearing and you're there and you submit a report, I don't want the judge to come to you. This is your one opportunity. It happens very rarely. We're not in court that much. So please say something. I really appreciate that when you do. Maybe sometimes you guys don't feel appreciated on that end, but I do appreciate it. And then I had marked on my notes too, slide number 25, and it's basically talking about seeing the child and how important that is. And I put, yes, we want to see the child. That's very important. Your rapport with this child is absolutely important. And then I put on 29, I wrote down interesting. So let me see why I put interesting on there. So I think it was about older youth. It might have been about that. Let me check real quick. Okay, yes, it is about older youth. They need and want to be involved. Older youth have opinions about their future. Just ask them. Your advocacy for an older youth may mean that you become the person speaking with them and not just for them. And when advocating for older youth, your role may become that of both an advocate and a mentor. And I think what I wrote when I said interesting is because I do find that a little interesting, because every yearly conference I've gone to, every training I've gone to with CASA, and sometimes even in the books, training materials they give us, they'll say, you are not a mentor. And then on this training from State CASA, it says, when advocating with older youth, your role may become that of both an advocate and a mentor. So let's remember that, because I always found that interesting, because in a way, especially with older youth, you are a mentor to them. So, and I've seen it in some videos, not from State CASA, but from National CASA, basically like interviewing people and saying how they felt like they were a mentor to them. So I always found it very interesting that you would hear the word mentor, but State CASA would always say you're not a mentor. So I think it's funny that they put that in here, and that's just a little side note from me. Not that anybody was asking me about that, of course. And also, when you are dealing with older youth, remember, yes, you want them to feel like they have a voice. You want them to be engaged. You want them to be involved. But it's the same as with the younger children. You can voice what they want, but you also let the court know what you feel based on the facts and based on your involvement in your observation, what is in the best interest of this child, okay? And the more time you spend with children, the more you're going to kind of be an expert on that, because you're going to see them a lot. Used to, they'd always say that the CASAs would see the children more than the FCMs, and I still hope that's true, because I know I have been at visits with kids, and I have seen an FCM come. And this was just recent, that this just happened to me on my very own case. And the FCM had to get a visit in. So they were like, well, can we stop by your office and get a visit in, da-da-da-da. I said, yeah. And they were here visiting, and I kept wondering where DCS was. Well, the last 10 minutes or so of the visit, they showed up. And they left before I did. So they weren't here very long, but they're counting that as their contact for the month. So if you're going to spend some time with a child, actually listen to a child, play games with the child, if they want you to attend games that they have, of course, that's something you're always going to have to ask about. But yeah, seeing that child, important. So very, very important. That's why I put in my notes too, to remind you of that's very important. But like I said, it is your opinion. It's fact-based. So we need to always remember that. It's an independent judgment to form an informed opinion, okay? So don't go to these trainings and be just really confused after our training. If you have some confusion, ask me, because there is, I've been here a minute, so I've seen some things just like that State Farm commercial. I think it's State Farm. I can't remember, but it's one of them. And they're like, we know some things because we've seen things, So I've been here. So the odds are likely that I've probably heard something about it, experienced it, or had a training on it, or know something about it, and I can help you with it. And if I can't, then I can look into it and see, how we deal with it in this county and what you need to do in your advocacy role. But I didn't want any confusion. And if you ever have a training like that with State CASA, I kind of wondered about this one because I know Leslie, and I know she kind of does her own thing, and I didn't know what she might say on this. So I was kind of thinking, maybe I ought to be at that training, but this is probably too much information, but I was actually fixing my toilet. So, but I did hear about it. I heard about it from a few people, and I got some feedback on it. So I just want to let you guys know how I felt about that. And if anybody wants the slides from that training sent to them so that if you didn't take the training, you could better understand what I'm talking about here, that's fine with me too. But I just wanted to let all of you know that, I, even if I'm not at a training, I hear about things, I look into things, I pay attention, and any questions you have, I'm always going to answer them, and I'm always going to be here for support for you. And I think that one of the things that really got me is that I'm always telling you guys to speak up. And then I was hearing that they were saying, don't speak up. And I was like, no, I don't want trainings like that. We can't have that. We don't want that. We don't want anybody confused about the fact that they can speak up. Your voice, things, voice, that means speak up. That means say something, that's active, so make sure you're active on this case. You're active in these team meetings. Don't let people run you over. Don't let people make you think that your advocacy role for this child isn't of extreme importance on these cases, because it is. I always say we are small, but we are mighty. I mean that. Okay, so just don't forget about that, because I've had some cases here lately where I'm like, wow, what if this would have been a case where we didn't have a CASA on it? I have no idea some of the decisions they would have made that would have been an extreme injustice to this child. So whether you think that, me being here is not that big of a deal, it is, because you're an extra set of eyes, you're a voice, you're independent of DCS. They know you're there, whether they act like they do or not. They are making decisions based on the fact that they know CASA probably won't be okay with this. And just the other day, I had a mom that I felt like, visits in her home based on recent arrests and things just weren't going to be good for this child to have visits in that home anymore. I thought it was toxic. I thought it could cause, ultimately cause more trauma to this baby. And I had messaged the FCM supervisor about it because the FCM wasn't in. And I told her, I said, I read these police reports. I don't think this is good. I think this is very toxic for this child. I told her some other things that have been going on. And I also messaged the provider and told her, this is not DCS's thoughts. These are my thoughts. And I don't think this is good for this child. I don't think these visits should be in this home. Well, then the provider then told me what the parents had told her was going on. And a lot of that was not true. Though they had a lot of gaps in their story. There were a lot of things missing. So I filled the provider in. And I said it again, I don't make the ultimate decision on this. I just don't think it's a good call to have these visits in the home. Well, the FCM supervisor didn't get back with me, but a few minutes later, the provider texted me and told me that DCS has decided it wouldn't be good for the kids to have the visits in the home anymore, and they're going to have them back out in the community. Now, DCS did not say it was because of CASA hammering us and saying, hey, this isn't going to be good. I don't like this. It's traumatizing. Yeah, DCS took the credit and basically acted like they were trying to keep the child safe, but I don't really care. I don't care who gets the credit for that. But if there had not been a little voice in the background saying, we're here, I always refer to the Horton Hears the Who, saying when I do that one. But if it wasn't for that little pestering voice saying, we're here, I don't think DCS would have changed the way visits were going on that. And so that's why it's really important to stay in touch with your placements. They're going to tell you so much information. Sometimes it's not always true. And sometimes, of course, they're a little biased, but, you've got to take that into account. You've got to stay in touch with the providers, DCS, parents if you can. I know they're MIA and that's really difficult sometimes, but you need to read those reports. You need to stay on top of this stuff. If people aren't texting and emailing you, you need to be texting and emailing them, because you don't want to be the last one to know, because the decision could have been made and you weren't there to be on top of it, so you didn't have any influence on that decision. We can't have influence if we're just sitting there. No, we're not doing that. So I just want to make it perfectly clear. Also, I'm going to attach a few questions to this email so everybody can respond to me separately and answer those questions, just so I know, you kind of watched the email. And then if you did watch the email and you did answer the questions, then great, because I will go ahead, once you send me back the answers to the questions, I will go ahead and put you in another half-hour training in your in-service training for doing this, because I really appreciate it. I appreciate it when you take time. I appreciate it when you listen, and I appreciate it when you follow through, and I appreciate your voices. And let's never forget we have a voice in this, okay? We're a voice for the kids, and that's important. Thank you, guys. Have a great day. Appreciate you.